Chapter 2. Hard Choices. The next day, before dawn. I got up early 8, drank some apple juice that I had gotten from the department store yesterday, and then got out of the APC. It was time to train, in the woods. I stretched, then grabbed my sword and kunai thigh holder, wore them both, and started running down to the quarry. The sun was rising and the darkness was receding. When I arrived near the lake, I saw Glenn and the 6 other young guys of the camp waiting for me, all dressed in light workout clothes. Yesterday before dark I had met them, and gave them a speech about protecting our people, and now here they were ready to learn. They were chatting to each other, completely unaware of my presence just behind them. Not that they would ever be able to detect me. I was a freaking ninja, man. Moving stealthily through the forest was as easy as breathing for me. "Boo!" I yelled, and the reactions I got nearly had me bursting with laughter. The guys all jumped, some yelped, others screamed in fright, and Glenn ran a few meters before realizing it was me. "You guys seriously gotta work on your situational awareness?" I said, chuckling. "Damn, man, that's not cool." I nearly crapped my pants. "Count yourself lucky, then. I'm pretty sure I peed a little." The guys grumbled, clearly not pleased with my little prank. However, it only made me want to laugh more. I then focused back on the task at hand and gave everyone a knife each. The kitchen knives I had picked up back in Atlanta from my apartment complex. Then I handed them all the HKP-7 handguns. I showed them how to load it, how to remove the safety, and how to aim. There wouldn't be any target practice yet. For now, they were to only use the guns if they had no other options. Then we started our training, an early morning jog around the perimeter of our camp to make sure there were no walkers around. Everyone was in high spirits when we started, cheerfully chatting as we jogged at a very light pace. Little did they know that this training was about to get a whole lot serious and potentially dangerous. Glenn Pova back at camp, 3 hours later. Glenn ran back into camp panting heavily. His limbs felt so heavy he felt like they were about to just fall off of his body. Behind him, covered in grime and blood, were the other guys. Matt, Charlie, Harry, Simon, Jimmy, and Kevin. What they had thought would be a warm-up jog through the woods turned into a full-on sprint for survival. Hadrian had led them all the way to the other side of the valley, where they encountered a horde of over 50 walkers. Then Hadrian turned to them and told them that the real training was starting. He then pulled out his Glock and fired a shot into the horde, killing one of the walkers. This caught the attention of the rest of the horde, and they started rushing towards where they were. Then, to make it even worse, Hadrian told them to sprint back to camp to warn everyone, and he told them that the guns they carried were empty. Before Glenn and the others could voice their confusion, Hadrian ran, just full-on sprinted into the woods and disappeared, abandoning all of them. Glenn took charge and led the guys, killing walkers as they made their way back. He remembered what Hadrian had told them. To kill a walker fast, you had to aim for their heads by smashing it, or stabbing through their eyes or under their chins and jaws. Luckily, they all had machetes and kitchen knives and wore some baseball catcher's gear, protecting themselves from infection. Finally, we made it, Matt said breathlessly, tripping on his own foot and falling near the parked cars. As they milled into camp, they saw everyone going about their day, oblivious to the danger that Glenn and the others just fought through. Then it hit them, Hadrian's words from the afternoon yesterday, about how unprepared and vulnerable the camp was, about how easy it would be for a horde of walkers to just waltz in and eat everyone. Just as Simon was about to step forward and yell for everyone to get ready for a zombie ambush, they spotted Hadrian walking leisurely out of the woods beside them like a ghost, also covered in blood and grime. He had on a satisfied smirk on his face. "Well done, you all survived the first test," Hadrian said, walking up to them. "What? That was a test? What the hell, man?" "What about the horde? They were behind us." The others asked rapid-fire questions. Even Glenn couldn't help asking about the horde that had chased them all the way back. "Oh, don't worry, I wiped out the horde after you guys broke through. Congrats, you've been bloodied by your first kills. Now you're ready," Hadrian said with a wider smile that sent shivers down Glenn and the others' spines. "Wait, You telling us you killed all the remaining geeks by yourself? Glenn asked, shocked. Yep, so nothing to worry about, fellas. Hadrian replied with a confident nod. There was a second of silence. Everyone stood frozen, not expecting to hear that the walkers that they had struggled to escape from had all been killed by Hadrian alone. So, now what? Kevin asked. Now we go take a bath. Hadrian replied, We stink. The guys laughed and followed Hadrian down the track towards the quarry. Everyone conversed among themselves with a tone of solidarity amongst brothers. Glenn was right beside Hadrian, telling him of how he had killed a few of the geeks to save Jimmy from being bitten. For the first time since the world ended, Glenn felt like he was back in college, speaking with a couple of his friends. It felt nostalgic. As they walked out of camp, Glenn saw the surprised, worried looks everyone gave them. He wasn't surprised, after all, their appearances were caked in blood. Dead man's blood, but still blood. The shock and fear in their eyes steeled Glenn's resolve more. They really are naive about the world we live in right now, Glenn thought. Remembering the feeling of having to run for his life and fighting his way back here, Hadrian's right, we need to learn to fight, to survive, and then to thrive. And with that, Glenn had subconsciously decided to follow Hadrian through thick or thin. What he didn't know at the time was that this decision of his would ensure his survival and turn him into a legend in the future. Rick Pavard. Rick watched, stunned, as Hadrian led the younger guys in camp down to the quarry, all of them covered in blood. It was pretty clear that Hadrian had taken them to clear a horde, but from where Rick wasn't sure. Turning around, he saw the worry on everyone's faces, and the suspicion on Shane's as he also watched Hadrian and the others. What do you think happened? Dale came over and asked. I don't know, but whatever it was, it looks like Hadrian and the others killed a few of the walkers. Rick replied, the unease and concern was clear in his voice. Is this place not as safe as I thought it was? Rick asked himself internally. What the hell were those idiots thinking? They could have brought an entire horde down on us. Shane said as he walked over, I told you that kid didn't need them guns. Now, look, he's armed civilians and gone out to play hunter. I think you should calm down, Jim said from his tent and walked over as well. Glenn told me last night that Hadrian had planned for them and the other younger guys in camp to run the perimeter and check to see if any walkers were nearby. Seems to me like they just saved our bacon. Shane grumbled something and walked off, while Rick, Dale, and Jim watched him. Suddenly, Merl came out to join them from behind. What's wedged up his ass? Merl asked, eyeing Shane as he walked away. The kid did good taking them boys out. He's just pissed Hadrian got to keep some of the guns and ammo from the gun bag. Rick answered, shaking his head in disappointment at Shane's behavior. TSK, it's the end of the goddamn world. Merl said in a chuckle. Hell, if it were up to me, everyone in this camp would be armed with a gun and trained to shoot. Then Merl walked off as well. Jim and Dale also left to check on Dale's RV, leaving Rick pondering deeply on Merl's words. The camp really did need protection. Turning around, Rick spotted Carol and walked over to greet her. Suddenly, a scream echoed out down near the lake, causing everyone to tense. And CPOV. Myself and the guys were in the lake for less than 5 minutes before we heard a scream, then the yelling. We could tell it came from the kids near us, so everyone rushed out. And, like idiots, they forgot to pick up their weapons and ran with nothing but their boxers on towards the commotion. I calmly climbed out of the lake, then quickly dried myself off and wore my gear. I put on my pants, greaves, and fastened the kunai holder on my thigh, and held my sheathed sword in my right hand. Then I jogged over, carrying my vest, gun belt, and shirt. My upper torso was exposed bare. I had not taken my shuriken pouch or the rest of the kunai for the morning test. They were still in my PC truck. I arrived just in time to see everyone kicking, hitting, smacking, and smashing the walker with the whatever they were holding. They were not even going for the head and just wasting their energy hitting it like it could feel pain. Glenn and the other guys didn't engage and instead stood to the side watching with confused expressions. What the hell are you idiots doing? I yelled, causing everyone to freeze and turn to me. With a simple flick of my wrist, I sent my wire kunai flying at incredible speed. The walker's head gave a soft plop sound and it stopped moving, dropping dead. My kunai embedded in the back of its head. Zombie apocalypse survival tip number 1, always go for the brain, I said, and yanked the wire in my hand connected to the kunai. It dislodged itself effortlessly and flew back into my hand where I stood about a meter away. Learn and adapt, or you're all gonna be dead by the end of the week. With that said, I turned and walked away. Leaving the stunned group behind, Glenn and the others followed right after me. Cleaning my kunai with some tissue, I saw Andrea and Amy looking at me with wide eyes. I couldn't really tell what they were thinking. Andrea's gaze towards me had changed. She wasn't as fearful as she was yesterday. I gave her a nod of greeting as I passed her and Amy. She gave a stiff nod back, while Amy gave me a confused, almost awe-filled look. I passed by Carl, Lori, Sophia, and Carol, giving Carl and Sophia a smile and a wink. They relaxed slightly in their mother's arms. But I knew today would change their outlook on life. Morales gave me a nod of gratitude since it seemed his children were also here playing with Sophia and Carl when they saw the walker. Lori had a look of fear on her face towards me for some reason, and Carol gave me a grateful, tear-stricken smile. Glenn came over and clapped my shoulder with a grin and told me I looked badass. The other 6 guys of our group also chuckled and started teasing and joking. The 7 of us made our way back down to the lake, where we collected the rest of our stuff. Then we climbed up the hill towards the camp. It was time for breakfast. Amy POV, Amy watched as Hadrian walked away, at how the other guys in camp fell in behind him, laughing and joking. Her eyes were locked on his back, but her mind was replaying what she had seen. If she had to choose a word to describe it, the word would be incredible. With just a flick of his wrist, he killed that walker like it was nothing, and then effortlessly retrieved his knife with a yank of the wire. Andrea had told her of how he had disarmed her in Atlanta with that same trick, and almost choked her. Amy was furious at the time and wanted to confront Hadrian about it. However, Andrea had talked her out of it, saying it was her own fault for pointing a gun at him when he hadn't done anything wrong in the first place. Amy felt herself go wet between the legs and her heart flutter when Hadrian had turned around. His bare chest, his abs, the defined muscle lines of his body, it made her weak in the legs. It was the first time she had felt such raw attraction for someone. Besides, it wasn't just his body that had turned her on. It was the effortless way he handled himself. With confidence and surety, like nothing could faze him. Of course it helped that he was very good looking too. Stop drooling, Andrea said and squeezed Amy's arm, causing Amy to realize she had been daydreaming. I wasn't, Amy said too quickly, causing Andrea to chuckle at her flustered state. I know he's hot, but he's also dangerous, Amy, Andrea said. Don't even think about it. What do you mean? I wasn't thinking of anything. Amy quickly tried to defend herself, but her tone betrayed her. As she and Andrea were talking, the others walked over to check on the kids. Then Daryl came out of the woods carrying a deer on his back and some squirrels hanging on his hip. He saw the dead walker and asked what happened. Merl, who had come over just a second ago, laughed and told Daryl everything. While everyone was still discussing what had happened, Andrea and Amy left with Lori, Carl, Carol, Sophia, Miranda and her kids, leaving Morales to talk with the other men. Amy then told Andrea she was gonna go ask Hadrian if he had any dirty clothes that needed cleaning, which caused Andrea to almost smack her upside the head. Rick Pave. This is the first time one of them has made it this close to camp, Dale said, looking back at the now dead corpse. They've never come this far before. They're probably running out of food in the city, Jim said, wiping his sweat. And the kid made the right call going on that perimeter check in the morning. There might have been more if he and the others hadn't taken care of them. How do we know that they didn't attract more of them here by killing that horde, huh? Shane said, looking at Jim. For all we know, that thing could have come here after hearing them kill the others in the woods. If y'all are talking about the walker horde in the forest, I found their remains. They were all slaughtered. You telling me Glenn and this new kid got some of the guys and went in to lay the smack down on him? Daryl asked with a tone of respect. Yep, kid's got balls of steel, Merl said, clapping Daryl on the shoulder. Come on, let's get this deer cleaned up. We having venison tonight, y'all. Wait, How many bodies did you see in the woods, Daryl? Rick asked after thinking about the coming walker threat. About 50 or 60. Daryl answered and followed Merl up to camp. Damn it, we gotta be on high alert, Rick said, looking at Shane, Dale, Jim, T-Dog, and Morales. If Hadrian and the others already killed a horde, and that one wasn't part of it, that could mean there are more on the way. Everyone's faces paled. If what Rick guessed was right, they were all in danger, and they were under-equipped to face the coming danger. What about them guns Hadrian gave you yesterday? T-Dog suddenly asked. If we were all armed, wouldn't it mean more security for the whole camp? I don't think that's a good idea, Shane said, turning to Rick and the others. Arming civilians who have no experience handling guns could cause accidents to happen. Shane's right, Rick said, backing Shane, then looking to the others. Only those who have experience shooting will get a gun. The others will have to make do with knives, machetes, spades, rakes, and axes. Then what about Hadrian and the others? T-Dog countered, why do they get to keep their guns? Because T-Dog, Hadrian had the boys run through the woods hunting them walkers, Jim said, walking past them heading up the hill towards camp. Come on, by my count, there are only 3 others in camp who can handle guns. Let's get them on board. Rick and the others followed behind Jim as they made their way back. Rick couldn't help wondering if maybe they should start teaching some of the people in camp on how to shoot and gun safety. That would give them a good amount of support and give the camp more security. CPOV. The boys and I had just finished eating when Amy walked up to me. Glenn and the others were busy making spears from the branches we cut down when we came up, so they weren't close by. You're Hadrian, right? I'm Amy, Andrea's sister. Amy introduced herself, stuttering slightly with a nervous smile. Hi, Amy, what can I do for you? I asked, smiling back at her. Well, you see, the girls and I are gonna head on down to the lake to do laundry. So I came to ask if you had clothes that needed cleaning, Amy said, looking at me. Her blue eyes were memorizing to look at. You sure? I wouldn't want to trouble you, I replied, getting up from where I sat. It's no problem at all. Consider it my thanks for taking care of that walker earlier, Amy said with a bright smile, her eyes never leaving mine. I then led Amy towards my PC. I got and rummaged a bit and got the clothes I wore yesterday. Amy stood in front of the APC, looking in. Wow, it's pretty big, huh? Amy asked, looking on in awe and observing the interior of my PC. Yep, great for a little fun when on a long drive, I replied with a chuckle. Amy's cheeks flushed as she caught on to my meaning. I handed her my clothes and thanked her. She smiled and said no thanks was needed and walked off. Before she left, I asked her to let Andrea know I wanted to speak to her and apologize for my actions back in Atlanta. Amy gave me a nod and said she'd pass on the message. Soon she was walking away, her hips swaying. She turned to look at me a few more times as she left, making sure I was watching her. How good it would feel to fuck both her and Andrea together at the same time, I chuckled inwardly, just imagining both blonde, blue-eyed beauties lying naked in front of me. Just as I was about to close the APC's door, the CB inside cracked to life. I had kept it on, just in case other survivors tried radioing out for help from Atlanta, and now it seemed to have paid off. KZZ. Can anyone hear? ZZZ. I repeat. Can anyone hear me? Hello? Anyone out there on this channel? ZZZT? Please respond if there is anyone on this channel. KZZT asterisk. Hello? Can you hear me? This is one of the survivors of Atlanta speaking. Can you hear me? I responded, trying to steady the signal. KZZT asterisk. Oh, thank God, we thought the city was dead. My name's Joe. I'm with a group of 7 others. We heard about the shelter in Atlanta and we're on our way there. The city's overrun. We've been searching to link up with a group for a while, but haven't had any luck until you picked up. KZZT asterisk. Where are you right now? I asked, just as Glenn and the other guys came over with their completed spears. What's going on? Are they survivors? Glenn asked with surprise. The others also had surprised looks on their faces. We weren't expecting anyone else to radio in for help. Yeah, it would seem so, I replied with a nod. KZZT, we're just outside the city limits, north of Highway 85, came Joe's reply. KZZ, alright, I'm gonna head on over to meet you. There's a gas station on that stretch of the highway. Find it and wait for me there, I said before looking at Glenn and the others. KZZT asterisk, alright, we'll be there, came Joe's final reply. You sure about this? Kevin asked, looking concerned. Yeah, I got this. You guys do what we planned. Teams of 2, sweeping the perimeter every hour. Glenn let the others know where I'm headed. Matt, you're in charge of the first rotation, then switch with Glenn, I said, laying out the plan. Just as the boys moved to go carry out what we had discussed early on, Andrea walked up. She saw the guys moving off with determination and looked confused. She walked over to the APC front passenger door and locked eyes with me, looking up. What's going on? She asked with a concerned tone. Survivors, they just radioed in. I'm gonna go meet them, I answered and started arming up. Then I looked at her. Hey, you want to come with? Andrea froze for a second to process my words. Then she snapped out of it. She looked conflicted for a second, glancing back at camp before finally nodding in determination. Yeah, let's go, she said and climbed up the steps and into the passenger seat beside me. I started up the big beast and reversed out. Then I pressed the accelerator down and we sped down the dirt road towards the main road. I could see Shane and Rick run up just in time to see us leave round the corner using the rear view mirrors. On the way, I apologized to Andrea, who told me to forget it, saying I had more than made up for it by getting her and everyone else out of Atlanta. And as far as she was concerned, it was water under the bridge. We talked more as I swerved the APC onto the main road leading to Highway 85. Along the way, I gave Andrea a few tips and showed her how to turn off the safety of her gun. I even gave her one of the combat knives I had picked up from a dead soldier's body in Atlanta. She was more than grateful. On occasion, I'd catch her glancing my way. Something in her eyes told me she was sizing me up. I decided to table that for later. I might even get some action in the night, judging by the way she kept looking my way. I chuckled inwardly, knowing I had her hooked now. The only thing left was sealing the deal and then getting her sister to join. A grin played on my lips at the thought of having both sisters for myself as truck barreled on down the road. Rick Puv. Did Hadrian mention anything else about these survivors? How many there were? If they looking to join us? Anything? Rick asked Glenn and Charlie, who were standing beside Dale and Jim, who were working on the RV. No, when we got to the APC, he was already telling them to meet him at the gas station near the turnoff. Glenn replied with a shrug. Hey, kid's gone off to play hero again, Sheriff, Merl said, chuckling. If the people he's bringing back have guns and supplies, I say bring 'em on in. A few more capable hands around here's more than welcome. Daryl also piped up, holding a skinned rabbit. Seems this kid's the only one, man enough to see the bigger picture around here. The grumbling from the others stopped after hearing what Daryl said. And Rick himself was also starting to realize Hadrian had been one step ahead of trouble ever since they met. Come on, Daryl, let's go check on the venison. We got guests coming, Merl said, turning and walking away with his shotgun. Kid sure does make it lively around here, hee. Y'all better get your shit together, Daryl said, shaking his head in disappointment. Hey, old man, roast this up, will ya? Daryl threw Dale the skinned rabbit and followed Merl back to where they were operating the deer he had brought back. Dale had caught the skinned rabbit and was now showing it to Jim, who was still fixing up Dale's RV. Looks like we get to share? Dale said with a smirk, then turned to Rick. It's no big deal. Let the kid bring them folks over. We'll be safer in a bigger group. Have you all gone crazy? Shane suddenly yelled. This kid just left with Andrea to go pick up a bunch of strangers. They could be dangerous, and we haven't got much in the way of food. Kid's been here all of one day, and he's running off killing Zeds and bringing people in without discussing it with any of us. What's the big deal? More people we have, the more guns and hands to help build and fortify this place? Glenn said, looking at Charlie. Isn't that good? Yeah, I mean, we got guns, sure, but not many hands to wield them. Charlie backed him. Hadrian's been one step ahead of the problem so far. Let him do what he thinks is best. Y'all get the hell on out of here, Shane yelled, angry. Goddamn idiots. Got no damn sense in your brains, the lot of ya. We need to discuss things first as a group before anything is done. The safety of camp should be our priority, not bringing in more people. Shane, calm down, all right? Glenn and Charlie are right. More hands mean more security, Dale said, trying to calm Shane down. What do you think of all this, huh? Shane ignored Dale and asked Rick. It's done. We can't say anything about it now. Rick answered with a tired sigh. Hadrian's gone and done what he thinks is best for the group. Now we just gotta wait and see what happens. Shane turned sharply, cursing, and walked away. Rick understood Shane's frustrations well. Back in Atlanta, Hadrian had done the same thing, left without consulting anyone, doing things with no communication. But Rick couldn't deny that the outcome of Hadrian's actions were always good. So, in this instance, Rick decided to put his trust in Hadrian. Kid hasn't been wrong on anything so far. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, Rick thought inwardly, and left to go check on Lori and Carl down by the lake. Keep an ear on the CB. Andrea and Hadrian might radio in after they meet up with those survivors, Rick told Glenn and Charlie. He then turned and walked away, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He decided to spend the day with his son and wife. After all, he had missed a couple months. And since he arrived at camp and found them, there was a bit of an awkward, tense atmosphere between Lori and Shane. Rick knew something might have happened between them, but right now, he didn't want to think about it. Joe Harville POV. 20 minutes later, Route 85, North, Sunshine Rest gas station. Joe rummaged through the half-empty shelves of the gas station store. There wasn't much left, but it was still a decent haul for her and the others. Joe, I found some sodas. Want one? Ellen, Joe's mom, asked, shaking a can of Mountain Dew in front of her face. Soda? Really, Mom? Find some whiskey, then we can talk? Joe replied with a chuckle. Joe was 20. Her birthday was a month from now. Her and her mother, Ellen, plus a family friend, Ash, had left their roadhouse in Ohio before the world ended and the zombie apocalypse happened. Joe and her mom were hunters. People who hunted monsters that preyed on humans. A couple of months ago, they were hunting a vampire nest in Memphis, Tennessee, and got caught up in the world-ending pandemic. Luckily, they had friends and called in Rufus Jackson and Bobby Singer, who were also out on a hunt in Louisville, Indiana. Before the undead apocalypse got worse, Dean Winchester arrived with his younger brother, Sam, and Sam's girlfriend, Jessica Moore. They were in Frankfort, Kentucky on a road trip or something, and made it to them in time before the world stopped. They had survived in Memphis for a month, until their supplies started running low and decided to try their luck and find other survivors to form a group. On the way to Huntsville, Alabama, they picked up a broadcast from the emergency channel about a sanctuary in Atlanta. That was where they were headed before they ran into a horde of 2,000 walkers on Route 20 leading into the city. They took a few back roads and made to Route 85, where they picked up another signal. And that is how they had contacted some guy who claimed to be part of the survivors of Atlanta. He told them to wait for him here, and he would be on the way. So here they were, all 8 of them, snacking on what was left in the gas station store and waiting patiently for the guy to show up. When they arrived, there were 5 walkers roaming around. They easily killed them, since they were all trained on how to kill monsters since they were young. Hey, I see an armored truck driving up. You think it's the guy? Sam said, looking out of the window up the road. Sam? Is it the guy on the CB? Jess asked, walking over to stand beside her boyfriend. We'll know soon enough. Stick close to me, okay? Sam asked Jess, who nodded and squeezed Sam's hand. A black armored truck like those SWAT teams from the movies used came barreling down the road. It was much bigger than anything Joe had ever seen before, and it had a fierce look to it. Joe could tell it was very spacious inside. Damn, dude sure knows how to travel in style even when the world's ending, huh? Dean said, with an odd tone, slowly pulling out his shotgun and cocking it. Heads up, we got dead incoming. Bobby suddenly warned them and picked up his rifle. I count 7 coming from the tree line from across the road. They'd probably heard the truck's engine. All right, get ready to help our friend, Rufus said, loading his own rifle and walking closer to the door. The armored truck did not stop. Instead, it drove straight up into the driveway. then parked alongside the station store. The front door swung open and a well-built, 6-foot-tall young man hopped down. He wore green tactical pants, greaves, combat boots, a tactical vest over a gray long-sleeve flannel shirt and vambraces. On his right hip was a Glock 16 with an attached silencer. On his left thigh was what looked to be a dagger holder strapped tightly, and over his right shoulder, peeking out, was the hilt of a sword. On his left hip was a tomahawk axe hanging loosely. Jo found herself momentarily stunned, because of how young he looked. She watched with bated breath as the young man walked over to the door and gave a nod to John. Movement in the armored truck pulled Jo's attention away, and she spotted a blonde-haired woman with blue eyes move over to sit in the driver's seat after the young man got off. "Is he a model or something?" Ash asked, looking awestruck. Before she could find the words to respond, the young man turned and walked towards the road. Specifically, towards the 7 walkers. There was no hesitation in his movement. He moved forward with quiet, intense certainty that it caused Jo to lock her eyes on him. "Careful now, Joanna. Don't you go falling head of heels for someone you don't even know yet." Ellen, Jo's mother, teased her with a grin. Jo didn't bother responding because her entire focus was on the young man as he stood in the middle of the gas station's car park facing the 7 walkers alone. "Is that kid insane?" Dean mumbled, moving to try and help. However, before he could grab the door's handle, the young man moved. He moved so fast that everything ended within the blink of an eye. The 7 walkers had 7 daggers stabbed through their heads, and they dropped dead on the concrete. The young man had flicked those daggers out in the blink of an eye. Then, with a quick yank of what looked to be wires tied to the daggers, he effortlessly caught all 7, wiped the blades with a cloth hung on his waist, and placed the daggers back into the holder on his left thigh. "What the hell just happened?" Ash asked, completely flabbergasted. "It's over, just like that?" Even Sam looked shocked as he stood beside Jess with his M1911 handgun drawn. "He used kunai. I never thought I'd get to witness such a masterful technique as controlling kunai with wire," Rufus said from behind the counter, his shotgun held loosely in his hands and his mouth open. "Kunai, as in Japanese daggers, used mostly by ninjas during the Shogun era?" Bobby asked, causing everyone in the gas station to turn to look at Rufus. "Yeah, the shinobi," Rufus corrected, eyes still locked on the young man making his way over. "That young man must be from one of the last known shinobi clans in existence?" Jo was more confused than ever. Shinobi, ninja? She knew there were monsters out there that fed on human flesh, and now the world was facing a full-on zombie apocalypse. But ninjas returning? That she called bullshit on. Everyone was surprised and impressed at the same time after hearing what Rufus had said. "No way he's a ninja. He doesn't even dress like one," Jo thought to herself and watched as Bobby opened the door and welcomed their new friend in. "So you're the group, huh?" the young man asked, looking at all of them with a strange expression. "Not what you were expecting, kid." Ellen, Jo's mom, asked with a raised brow. No, it's not that. It's just, are you guys hunters by any chance?" the young man asked, causing everyone to stiffen in surprise. "Now how the heck did you figure that out?" Dean asked with an impressed tone. Jo found herself even more curious about who this guy was, and how he knew by just a glance that they were hunters. It intrigued her, and she found herself wanting to know more about him. "CPOV, it was an educated guess," I said, replying to Dean Winchester, who resembled Jensen Ackles. In fact, everyone in the gas station resembled the actors and actresses that portrayed them on screen. I was inwardly freaking out. The old man that sent me to this world had said he had a few little surprises for me, but I wasn't expecting this. I imagined evolved zombies like in State of Decay or something similar, not a freaking world merging. Bobby Singer stood near the door, holding a M4A1 assault rifle with a suppressor. Rufus Jackson, who held a shotgun, stood next to the counter. Dean Winchester stood next to some shelves. Sam Winchester stood next to Jessica Moore, his girlfriend, who was somehow alive and well. Then there was Ash, Ellen, and Jo. My mind was running at 100 miles per hour trying to make sense of this. "Hey, I'm Jo. I talked to you over the CB earlier," Jo said and walked over. She was slim, blonde, dark eyes, and a pretty face. Hadrian Walters. I'm here to pick you guys up, I managed to say. So you know about hunters? Bobby asked, stepping forward. Yeah, my mother was a white witch, and my father came from a long line of ancient warriors that hunted supernatural creatures. I lied, making up a story to fool them. So you're decaded from shinobi, then? Rufus asked, making his way over to grab both my shoulders. His eyes were wide open, staring intently at me. Yeah, I was trained in the art of ninjutsu since I was 6, I replied. Rufus seemed to have short-circuited because he stood rooted to the spot, mouth wide open, muttering something incoherent. Ninjutsu? Is that what you did with those? Kunai? Bobby asked. You could say that, yes. I replied, anyway, shouldn't you guys be introducing yourselves? Oh, right. Joe said, taking the initiative. I'm Joe Harville, that's my mom, Ellen. Beside her is Ash. The one still trying to return to reality is Rufus. The grizzled guy with the trucker cap is Bobby. That's Dean and Sam, and Jess, Sam's girlfriend. Joe introduced everyone, who each gave me nods of greeting. Except for Rufus, who was still out of it. I spent the next 10 minutes learning how they all got here. Then I decided we needed to scavenge for supplies before we returned to camp. So we got to packing the food, drinks, and anything else of value that could help us survive into my PC and their cars. I also introduced Andrea to everyone. Dean started flirting with her, however. Andrea, already used to Merl, just laughed it off. I found a fuel truck parked out back. Rufus, who had finally snapped out of his daze, said he knew how to operate it, so I let him pump all the gas in the station's tanks back into the truck. I then asked Dean to check and siphon fuel out from the cars parked nearby. Then Bobby, Sam, and I found a locked storeroom in the back of the gas station. Sam, being a decent lockpicker, quickly got to work, and within a minute the door clicked open. When we entered, we found a large storage area with packed boxes of supplies. Hey, guess we hit the jackpot, Bobby said with a wide grin. The 3 of us got to work, checking cartons, making sure food was still fresh, carrying stuff out to the cars, and with the help of the others keeping a lookout over the area and clearing walkers that wandered out of the tree line. Everything went smoothly. About an hour later, we were all packed up and on the road heading towards the quarry. I led the way in my PC with Andrea and Joe, who had somehow become fast friends. She sat in the back with Andrea on the 4 remaining foldable seats of the APC. Behind us in a GMC truck was Sam and Jessica. Behind them in SUV was Ellen and Ash. Right after them was Dean in the Chevy Impala. Following him was Rufus driving the semi, pulling the oil tanker. And taking up the rear in a very modern RV bus was Bobby. This world just got a lot more interesting, I thought to myself as we neared the road leading towards the quarry.